time being introduced to the curriculum. Again, our follow-up webinars for Lesson 2 will be on May 20th and for Lesson 3 on June 17th. And we'll send out reminders to everyone closer to those dates. Okay, so let's get started. So Break the Cycle works to engage, educate, and empower young people to build lives and communities free from domestic and dating violence. I know that many of you are already familiar with Break the Cycle, and a lot of you already use the old version of LINA. But I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page of how Break the Cycle and Leverage Respect talks about teen dating abuse. So for that reason, I'm just going to touch up on some basics, first about Break the Cycle and the issue. So Break the Cycle and the National Domestic Violence Hotline launched the new Leverage Respect in 2011. With this collaboration, we have the expert content and resources from Break the Cycle, 24/7 peer advocate assistance from the hotline, and a national leadership voice in our National Youth Advisory Board, which I'll talk more about later. So because of this partnership, you'll see references of leveragerespect.org throughout this curriculum as the main resource where young people can get help and learn more about healthy relationships. Together with Leverage Respect, we reach more than 1.5 million young people annually through educational programs, online resources, public campaigns, and a 24/7 peer advocate-led help service. And what that means is that young people can live chat online, text, or even call a trained peer advocate to get help or more information. You can also visit leveragerespect.org to download and print additional resources such as palm cards, posters, or handouts. And I know that's a really common question that I get, so that's a great resource. Okay, so before we get started, I just want to check in with you all. We have a poll question here, and I think Nicole is going to launch that for us. Yes. So I just want to ask you, how many teens experience some form of abuse in their dating relationships? And this is a question that we ask both young people and adults because it can be surprising. Go ahead and take a minute. Okay, so as about 55% of you answered correctly, yes, 1 in 3 teens will experience some form of physical, sexual, emotional, or verbal abuse from a dating partner, and that's in the United States, and that figure far exceeds rates of other types of youth violence. So it is a problem, it's a silent epidemic, and that's why we spend so much time talking about how to resolve that. Okay, so what is dating abuse? Nearly 1.5 million high school students nationwide experience physical abuse from a dating partner in a single year. According to a study done in 2000 by the American Bar Association Juvenile Justice Center, violent behavior typically begins between the ages of 12 and 18, which is interesting because when we're in the classroom asking young people when they begin dating, they usually say about 5th or 6th grade, which is around that same age. And we know by 8th and 9th grade, 72% of youth are dating. So it's pretty safe to say that dating abuse can occur when dating occurs. So Leverage Respect defines dating abuse as a pattern of abusive behaviors used to exert power and control over a dating partner. This image from our interactive power and control wheel resource online at leveragerespect.org, and you can see that there are different ways power and control can be used in a relationship. So isolation is one form of emotional or verbal abuse where the partner controls who their partner sees, who their partner talks to, what they read, where they go, all to limit outside involvement and therefore increase their power and control. And they often do this by using jealousy to justify their controlling behavior. For example, telling a partner that they can't have friends of the opposite sex, or that they can't go out with their friends anymore because they should spend all their time with their partner. Okay, and so we talk mainly about 4 types of abuse with youth. The first is physical abuse, which is any intentional use of physical force with the intent to cause fear or injury. So, for example, hitting, shoving, biting, strangling, kicking, or using a weapon. The second here is sexual abuse, which is any action that impacts the person's ability to control their sexual activity or the circumstances in which sexual activity occurs, including restricting access to birth control or condoms. Ignoring someone's refusal to engage in sexual activities by repeatedly using emotional, verbal, or physical pressure. Verbal and emotional abuse is non-physical behaviors such as threats, insults, constant monitoring or checking in, excessive texting, humiliation, intimidation, or isolation, as we mentioned. And then there's digital abuse, which is the use of technology such as texting and social networking to bully, harass, stalk, or intimidate a partner. And often this behavior is a form of verbal or emotional abuse perpetrated through technology. In this curriculum, we spend the entire lesson 3 dedicated to talking about digital abuse because as technologies like cell phones and social networking become the norm for communication, they also can be used for abuse and control. All right. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at some of the key objectives of the curriculum as a whole. So the first goal is to increase students' understanding of teen dating abuse. By the end of the curriculum, youth participants should know the warning signs of abuse, the types of abuse, and not just extreme examples, but also more subtle examples that are often overlooked, as well as the obstacles for teen victims who want to get help. We know that about 61% of teens only tell a friend about their abuse. We believe it's very important to educate all youth on how to help a friend so that they know how to be supportive and can direct them to the right resources. So we aim to encourage help-seeking behavior among youth by providing an array of resources throughout the curriculum. You'll find in the introduction a list of websites with additional resources to ours. But one of my favorite parts of the curriculum is the focus on healthy relationships. In the next slide, I'll go more in detail, but it's important to note that we also challenge youth to think of healthy alternatives to abuse. And lastly, what makes this curriculum so unique is the way LINA blends literature and critical thinking with health education. So it draws on the motivating power of text to build reading, writing, and analysis skills, all while helping students develop tools for preventing and responding to dating abuse. LINA is designed to inspire individual and systematic change toward healthier relationships using both real and fictional stories. We do pull from specific literature throughout this curriculum, but you may also want to talk to youth about characters from whatever novel or series is popular with them at the moment. I mean, I know firsthand if my 17-year-old sister was told she could read Twilight using this curriculum, she would be thrilled to learn about dating abuse. So for this reason, we've created a basic template for analyzing romantic relationships in any piece of literature along with a book list of different literature that we recommend using. So feel free to personalize the curriculum to fit your students because it will only make the process more effective. Okay, so I just want to make it clear that this curriculum is still a free digital resource online that anyone is welcome to use. It's a traditional style curriculum that comes with everything you need to know to implement, as well as additional resources that you can add online. We did remove the video supplements from the original version, but don't worry, they are still available to access on loveisnotabuse.com. So overall, the revision includes more recent and relevant stats, fresh stories, information on creating a crisis or follow-up plan, and trigger warnings, which we'll talk about in a bit. Additional resources for teens to get help or learn more information. And again, a shift to focus more on building healthy relationships. That means characteristics of healthy relationships to examples of healthy relationships in the media and in their own lives. So we also have the opportunity to get feedback from Leverage Respect's National Youth Advisory Board to help include the teen perspective. And for those of you who are not familiar, the National Youth Advisory Board is a group of 25 hardworking and dedicated individuals ranging from 13 all the way to 24 who work together in their local communities and nationwide to raise awareness for healthy relationships. And it's very important for us to always include the youth voice in our projects to make sure we are staying relatable and engaging youth. So let's talk more about that feedback. But here's a summary of some of what the National Youth Advisory Board gave us as far as feedback about how youth understand and experience abuse or unhealthy behaviors in their relationships. So most young people can tell you what is or is not bad in a relationship. They may not be able to define it in the traditional sense, but for the most part, they can accurately characterize physical, emotional, or verbal and sexual abuse. We often hear from young people, and research also finds that young people think abuse is unhealthy behaviors in a relationship are okay based on the situation. For example, a sample of 5,404 sixth grade students was pulled from 4 diverse U.S. sites. Over half of the respondents reported that girls hitting their boyfriends was acceptable under certain circumstances. All the teens generally agreed that abusive behavior is never acceptable. However, many were willing to make exceptions based on context. Several females agreed that just playing around is okay, but that it shouldn't go too far. So more young men than women think it's okay for a partner to be jealous, and more older than younger teens tolerate jealous behavior. We also know that societal homophobia places stress both at the individual level and at the relational level. But do youth see it that way? Yes. Youth may stay in a violent relationship because of fear of reporting the abuse, or fear that reporting the abuse will lead to their identity becoming public to family and friends. As one woman stated, it's not made visible. It, or dating violence, happens so often because it's not culturally okay yet to be gay. Okay, so let's move on to the curriculum structure. The new revision consists of 3 45-minute, easy-to-follow lesson plans. A lesson can be completed in one English class, for example, or it can be split into sections to allow more time for each activity. Each lesson has important teacher background info and teaching tips, in-class activities, take-home assignments, and handouts. Dating Abuse 101, or basics, are covered in the first session, followed by a focus on the power and control wheel in Lesson 2. Lastly, the entire Lesson 3 is dedicated to technology, how it can be used to hurt and help build healthy relationships. Okay, so the teacher background information section includes important information for any facilitator to use, but it's written for the traditional teacher in a classroom setting. But I know that LINA can definitely be used outside of the classroom, for example, in after-school programs, youth groups, or maybe even a book club. If you have not already established guidelines for sensitive class discussions, make sure to do so before beginning the first lesson and at the start of each lesson after. So here are some examples of guidelines I use in the classroom. No question or questioner is stupid or wrong, and no put-downs are allowed. What students say in the classroom is confidential and should never be shared with others. These guidelines help to create a safe environment for open and honest discussion. It is also important for school staff to be prepared for some students to disclose dating abuse experiences or to have a difficult time with some of the class discussions if they have experienced abuse. A young person who has experienced violence or abuse may experience triggering or be reminded of their experience in a way that is scary or brings up strong negative feelings. Trigger warnings are recommended in order to give students an opportunity to step out if they feel uncomfortable. You'll notice that particular activities or sections of the curriculum will begin with a trigger warning. Here's an example of one on the right in the gray box. So it gives a template of what you can say to the class, just reminding them that this is a sensitive subject for some students. So, if they are if there's anyone that's experiencing difficult emotions, they can feel welcome to take a moment or ask for help privately at any time. So this is meant to serve as a reminder to the facilitator to let youth participants know what is coming. And once they're aware, they can decide for themselves if they can participate in the lesson or they should go to the safe place designated for that purpose. In the case of either a disclosure or crisis, it is important to be prepared in order to provide the appropriate support for students. Let them know where on campus or on the facility grounds they can talk to someone, such as a school counselor or a social worker. Another thing you might want to check in on before implementing Love is Not Abuse is informing your school counselors, social workers, psychologists, and administrators of the material that will be covered and the possibility of these triggers. It may be helpful to distribute the teacher background information from each lesson to all faculty and staff and provide information to parents and caregivers before beginning the program. In Lesson 1, the teacher background information includes suggestions for developing a plan for students seeking help or in crisis. Okay, so now on to Section 1, which is called Dating and Abuse 101. Okay, so the first activity in Lesson 1 follows a teen couple, Adelise and Richard, to talk about the dynamics of teen dating abuse. Let's see. In the section, an excerpt is pulled from the book, In Love and Danger, A Teen's Guide to Breaking Free of Abusive Relationships by Barry Levy, which was originally written in 1997 and revised in 2006. Barry is a nationally recognized trainer on DV and sexual violence and has been in the field for over 30 years, writing several books as resources for young people. This book is a great resource in itself, and it also provides additional resources at the end of the book. The I Thought Things Would Change handout gives youth a chance to recognize the signs of abuse in a fictional story. They can see what abuse may look like in a relationship. This is a good discussion starter for the facilitator to identify some myths and stereotypes of abuse, such as gender bias, of people who show abusive behaviors, or the idea that only physical abuse is serious. Another myth is that dating abuse only happens in heterosexual relationships, which we talked about earlier. And we actually added in an optional story with an LGBTQ couple to challenge those stereotypes. You can use this in addition to the Adelise and Richard story, or if you're presenting to an LGBTQ youth group specifically. The next handout, What is Teen Dating Abuse?, goes over the different types of abuse and presents several examples of each. It's very important to also make sure to go over the effects that being in an abusive relationship may have. Again, reading the teacher background information will give you, as a facilitator, any additional support you may need for this activity. Okay, so I want to check in with you all again. This is an excerpt from the I Thought Things Would Change handout. And so what type of abuse does the following excerpt exemplify? He had to make sure I wasn't doing anything. He'd find out from his friends if I was talking to someone, and we'd get in a big argument. Is that verbal emotional abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, or digital abuse? Okay, so yes, 70% of you said it was verbal and emotional abuse, and that's correct. So that's going back to the power and control wheel and isolation. That would be another example of isolation. So good job. Okay, moving on. So the activity step 2 in lesson 1 defines the rules in dating abuse. And of course, there's a handout to go along with that called Rules in Dating Abuse. So at Break the Cycle and Lovers Respect, we talk about these key players in a dating abusive relationship. So we believe that abuse is a choice, and using the word abuser may sound like it's beyond that person's control. However, saying person showing abusive behaviors really focuses on the abusive behavior instead of the person. In the DB community, there are different ways that someone experiencing abuse is referred to. Sometimes using the label victim can be stigmatizing or disempowering, so some prefer to use survivor instead. Not all victims are survivors, so it really depends on the person. The point is that we want to avoid associating victim with helpless. A person experiencing abuse is not alone. There are resources out there where they can get help. But what I really want to focus on is the role of the bystander. So a bystander doesn't have to be present while the abuse occurs. They are a bystander even if they are aware the abuse is happening. And with teens specifically, we want them to think about bystander intervention even when jokes are being made about dating abuse or when there's sexual or sexist comments. Bystander intervention is not about putting a young person in danger or asking them to get involved when there's physical violence present, but ultimately to have a zero tolerance for a culture that accepts violence. Sometimes it may feel overwhelming to a young person if they feel they have to be like a Superman to help, which can lead to the bystander effect of doing nothing. In this section, we talk about small ways that young people can take action every day. And some of the most clever and effective tactics that we've heard of have come from the experiences of students. Most of the time, they rarely involve direct confrontation or heroism. Here are a couple of suggestions of ways to intervene that some students have shared. Texting your friend to check in and see if they're cool with the situation. So that's before, intervening or assuming that, what they're seeing is not a good situation. Or having a conversation beforehand and agreeing upon secret cues that will let their friend know that it's time to go. The handout in this activity also asks for youth to identify bystanders in Annalise and Richard's story. So who did nothing? Who contributed to the abuse by reporting to Richard about Annalise's whereabouts? So it just asks them, gets them to start thinking about the different roles and where they can fit into that. I know when I'm in the classroom, the most common question I receive is, but how do I help a friend who is in an unhealthy or abusive relationship? I know I had this question in high school when my best friend was experiencing abuse in her relationship. As a teen or an adult, it's not easy. Although the friend has good intentions, oftentimes bad advice is given to the person experiencing abuse that may ultimately put them in more danger. So there's also a take-home assignment at the end of lesson 1 that uses a handout called Helping a Friend Who is Being Abused. This gives more information on how to approach a friend going through abuse and small ways to take action. So the handout also challenges youth to pretend they are Annalise's friend by writing her a letter reaching out to help her. And I think this is a great way for participants to practice starting a conversation and guiding a future friend or family member to the right resources. The third activity steps asks for youth to list characteristics of healthy relationships. So things like trust, companionship, respect are answers we usually get when we do this activity at outreach events with youth. So the idea is that there are many definitions of abuse. We see here sharing, commitment, sunshine, pandas. I think my favorite one I've gotten at an outreach event is tacos. which I can't really argue with. There are many definitions of love, but abuse is not one of them. And so going back to the I Thought Things Would Change handout, youth are asked to describe a healthy alternative to that relationship. What would Adelise and Richard's relationship look like if it were healthy? At Lovers Respect, we believe that it's just as important to focus on healthy relationships as it is teen dating abuse. It's easy nowadays with the tremendous influence from pop culture and media for young people to lose sight of what healthy really means, and also to normalize violence. So we've added one of our resources from loveisrespect.org called the Healthy Relationship Quiz as an additional activity. This can be passed out during class as a private activity students can do in their journals, or it can be talked about among a group in the class. It's a relatable yet fun way for teens to see how healthy relationships are, how healthy their relationships are. And it's set up similar to any magazine quiz where youth add up their scores at the end to see where their relationship falls on the spectrum from healthy to unhealthy to abusive. And another great thing about this is it really gets them to think about their relationships, and it's not someone telling them that their relationship is one way or the other. Okay, last poll question. So, though 82% of parents feel confident that they could recognize the signs of abuse if their child was experiencing dating abuse, what percent of parents could not correctly identify all the warning signs of abuse? And that's 75%, 22%, 58%, or 7%. Okay, so I see 20% of you said 75% of parents, and then 40% said 58%. And you both are close, but it is 58% of parents could not correctly identify all the warning signs of abuse. So this last statistic leads to our final activity for Lesson 1, which allows time to answer questions and wrap up, but it also provides a letter to parents on teen dating abuse. The distribution of this element is at your discretion, though it is often a great way to get families to start an ongoing discussion on teen dating abuse and healthy relationships. You can also refer parents and fellow teachers and administrators to breakthecycle.org for more information. Okay, so I know I covered a lot of information, but I would like to take this opportunity to answer any questions that may have not already been answered previously.
So Christine Marie, we have a question in the public chat from Erica. And her question is, how much of the curriculum is dedicated to discussing sexual violence?
Right. Okay, so sexual violence is incorporated throughout the curriculum, but we and we talk a lot about it more in lesson 3, where we focus on digital abuse, but we use examples of, we incorporate it through talking about sexting, which is a very common problem in high schools nowadays, and so we mention it throughout, but we don't have a specific lesson dedicated just to sexual violence. Does that answer your question? Okay, great.
All right, our next question comes from Stacy. And her question is, what is the best way to get information to teens and parents if schools are not offering it to students?
Okay, so that's a great question. If this is not able to be implemented in a school setting, no, there is leveragerespect.org, which I would recommend. It's the best website for any young person to learn more information, to partake in interactive activities online. We have our Healthy Relationship Spectrum, which is really great, and it gives different scenarios throughout a relationship, and then the young person has to decide if it's healthy, unhealthy, or abusive. Or, you know, this curriculum doesn't have to be in a school setting, like I said. It is written that way, but it can also be implemented in, you know, a youth group outside of school, or it can be implemented, you know, really anywhere where there's a gathering of young people. But I would recommend leveragerespect.org as a great website, and then just maybe, you know, downloading some of our materials as far as handouts and all of that. And we do, I'm sorry, I didn't address the parents part. We do have those resources for parents on breakthecycle.org as well. And I know it may be confusing, but leveragerespect.org is mainly where we send youth, and it has youth-friendly language and more activities geared just for youth, whereas Break the Cycle is more for professionals, adults, and service providers who want to engage youth about healthy relationships. And so I see in here. Sorry, Nicole.
Yeah, I was just going to direct you to James' question.
Right. So how early do you think you should start this curriculum? This one is intended for high school. And depending on, you know, it really just depends. I know I just got a call earlier about using it for middle school. And I think it just really depends on your community and, you know, your students. I personally think it would work, but it is intended for high school. We do have a college version as well online, and we will be updating that college version sometime this year as well.
Great. Does anyone else have any more questions for Christine and Marie?
Okay. So I'm just going to go to the last contact information here. I just want to thank everyone again for joining us today and for your dedication to raising awareness for healthy relationships. If you have any questions or concerns after this webinar, you can also feel free to contact me or Nicole. And besides that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Nicole to wrap up.
Great. Thanks so much, Christine Marie. So thank you all for joining us today. Our next webinar will be on May 20th, and we'll be talking about the second lesson and talking about the power and control wheel, media's influence on how youth view relationships, and also on safety planning. Again, we will have both the PowerPoint slides you saw here today and the recording. We'll be sending that out later this week. And if you would be so kind as to tell us how you think we're doing and fill out this webinar evaluation. Thank you so much.